Hey guys, it's the Friction here, or Tiger Tank 1-2, however you want to call me. I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks. This time around we are on the test server, and the Sandbox server to be more precise. And Wargaming have released the final iteration of the artillery changes and the high explosive changes. Now, I've only wanted to jump into the Sandbox server because they released an article where they claimed that 70% of the people were really excited about the changes. Now, I've read the article, and I've also watched the video from Quickie Baby, and I'm not really sure if that is going to be the truth, or that really does contain the truth in it. But either way, we're going to be trying out at least one high explosive tank, and that's going to be the FV 4005. And we are going to be running it with the configuration that I would be running when I'm maybe playing tank destroyers. So I'm just going to be putting on the equipment, and we're just going to keep it at, we're just going to be firing high explosive and the premium HESH shells. But you can see that there are going to be some changes. So what do the high explosive changes entail? Well, they entail that you do less damage against armor because they have reworked the way that high explosive shells work when you hit a vehicle. Previously, I think it was that if you shot someone with high explosive, it would look for the weakest part of the armor on the vehicle, and it would use that part as the place where it can actually penetrate, and thus the player was actually able to maximize the damage with each and every single shot of high explosive. So let's say, for example, the mouse, or let's pick the mouse real fast. That was a good example that I've seen it work on a few times. The mouse frontal armor is obviously 200 millimeters thick, but the upper plate right here, this part where there are vents for possibly the engine, I think it is the engine, where there are vents right there, you know, to get some air into it, the armor is rather thin. It's maybe 50 millimeters thick. So if people started firing high explosive down at the turret and at the gun right there, it would splash down because it would look for the place that is the least armored, and because it was like a circular shape, it was able to detect that this place right there was rather thinly armored with 50 millimeters of armor. Thus, the shell, even if it landed over there and the impact should have been at that space right there, it splashed down and it did sometimes massive amounts of damage. But that was rather rare. You could really work with high explosive. You could splash it underneath the vehicle and do pretty good damage against vehicles. But in the end, I would not say that the high explosive was abused in ways. Certainly in certain situations, people did use high explosive more often than they maybe should have. But to be fair, if you're hull down and you're a Soviet tank destroyer or heavy tank, for example, like this Object 705A, which just doesn't have a weak spot on top of the turret, well, you're looking at a really awkward situation. What are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to just keep on bouncing off a turret, or are you supposed to do steady but maybe slow damage of 300 damage per shell? So Wargaming want to change that. They want to change it to that the armor is going to be working, the high explosive shell is not going to be able to detect the weakest part of the armor, and thus you're going to be looking at less damage dealt with each shot. But if you, or at least they say, if you are able to penetrate with the high explosive shell, since the penetration is still a thing, you're going to be doing more damage, or you're going to be dealing more damage. And I think it's about, they wanted to do it with, or wanted to add it as a consistency. So they wanted to have more consistency with the high explosive shells. But the problem is obviously that as soon as they add this into the game, we're going to be looking at some really awkward scenarios where the super heavily armored vehicles that are already super heavily armored are just going to be profiting off it even more. And even I think back in the days before they decided to go against the penetration changes, and to, you know, reduce the pen or completely take away the pen, the light tanks and the lightly armored vehicles would have really benefited from the change. But now it's a bit weird, it's a bit awkward to say the least. So we're going to be playing the FV4005, also known as the shit barn. And just so you know, I'm running this on my hard drive, so the loading times are rather extreme sometimes. And there might be a bit of stutter because I've noticed that World of Tanks does not run very well on a hard drive. And because it's a Sandbox server and a server that I'm not visiting very frequently, I obviously do not play a lot of games on here, and I decided to put it on the hard drive, which is, I think, quite a rational choice. So we're gonna be firing premium shells first because this is how I probably run my FV. If I play it, I'm gonna be quite an aggressive premium shell user. I'm gonna be a power user, as you guys know. And let's see, there's a target right there. He has a lot of armor. I have no idea where that shot went. But the ship barn isn't very accurate. Let me just see that I can have the 25 times zoom. I've just gotten so used to it, so I'm gonna be using it as well. So this gameplay right now, we're not here to look at the, you know, having the best kind of game. I just really want to see what I can do with high explosive shells and what the damage outlet is going to be if I'm able to shoot upwards. So we're not really aiming for great gameplay. We're aiming for hitting tanks with armor and seeing what the high explosive shells does. We're also going to be checking artillery afterwards. You can see right there was an arty shell. So they have new effects, and it looked like a high explosive shell because an AP shell will probably not splash that much. So I have no idea what that just was, but as you can see, we just hit the IS-7 frontally with a high explosive hash shell for 150 HP. So yeah, that's a bit awkward right there. And we just caught ourselves 2 massive shells and artillery as well. So right there you can actually see exactly where the artillery shell is coming from, or like about where it's coming from. So what happens if we are able to... Okay, we're just a massive target at the moment. I'm also not playing this tank like it's supposed to be played, but I just really want to hit tanks and be right in the middle of it to see what the high explosive shell does. And so far, the only hit that we had on target was a rather uninspirational. And remember, this is the premium shell that we're talking about. No, 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 get your turret away from... Oh, god damn it. I would have been able to hit that guy if his gun was just not in my way. Oh, he's coming in. That FE wants a shot. This is a bit awkward at the moment. I'm gonna die now, but I'm maybe going to be able to put one into the IS-7. Let's see what happens if we put one into the turret of the IS-7. Right there. So we did 219 damage. So we fired twice, and we're gonna die right here. We fired 2 HESH shells at the turret of IS-7. On average, I'd say about you do with the premium HESH shell, or even just a standard HESH shell, you would still do about 500 to 600 damage. And you could see right there, we only did about, in total, maybe 400 damage with 2 shots. So that's quite a drastic damage drop off, if you ask me. And I'm not really sure if this is going to be the right way to deal with the high explosive problem, as Wargaming have pointed out. Now, the thing is, like, you're not really going to be very effective in certain situations. What I'm really interested about is how does the KV2 handle these changes, because if you play the KV2, you know that the high explosive shells that you are using, well, they're always something that you can go back onto and, you know, fire at vehicles with, and, you know, do a certain amount of damage. Sometimes you are able to pen, and that's really nice, but that was kind of sad. That was really sad, because we did like 400 damage. Let's check the total amount of damage that we did right there. I know I didn't really play like a crazy player, but we did 369 HP worth of damage to the IS-7 by hitting him directly in the face with that massive 183mm gun. That is really unfortunate. That is unfortunate. But you know what? I want to see what happens with the high explosive shells that the EBR 105 is actually using, because the EBR 105 is one of the biggest problems probably in World of Tanks at the moment, just with the ridiculous amount of snapshotting potential and the high explosive shells that just have like 105mm of pen. And I have to be honest, the EBR is really one of the vehicles that needs to be addressed, but they could have addressed it, you know, by just dealing with the problems of the EBR without changing everything about the high explosive changes, because in the end, you know who's going to be profiting? All the super heavy vehicles are going to be profiting off the changes. And all the lightly armored vehicles will just be looking down the drain even further, because, well, they're still going to be the target of high explosive shells, but they can no longer use their high explosive shells to deal damage to, for example, the Object 705A. So heavy tanks are going to be getting a real big buff, if we think about it. It's really not that ideal. Also, what's going to be a bit of a problem is that I'm just thinking about it right now. The Gorilla, the FV, this with Crew 2.0 is not going to be a really nice experience. Oh god, look at the pixel graphics right there. There's no detail. This is probably going to be popping in just a second as soon as it loads. The hard drive is just not catching up really well. It's a bit of an older model, so it's not going to be working as well as the SSDs that I have in my system. So okay, because I penned the Stritzwagen right there, because I still have the pen, and we shot him at the side, it wasn't as bad. Oh yeah. It looks like the high explosive is just not going to be as effective anymore. Ah, I just realized what that was. That was artillery aiming at us. So that gives you kind of an idea what is happening. So basically, the high explosive spam that you were able to do with the EBR 105 is probably going to be history unless you're right behind them. But if you shoot at them directly from the front, your high explosive shells will not do a lot of damage, which probably is the right choice, at least for the EBR 105, because this tank, in the sense how it was featured and its intended purpose, I don't think that it should have this crazy high explosive pen. But I think they could have just decreased the penetration rate of the high explosive shells on this vehicle instead of completely changing the entirety of the system, which in the end is going to hurt a lot of other tanks that maybe shouldn't be hurt at the moment, because in the end people just are going to be playing a certain vehicle type, because if they are frustrated because of the lack of wins and everything, they're just gonna go to the certain vehicle types that are going to be really good. So this might just be a big meta shift, a big change where the entire meta gets overworked once again. I'm not sure if that is a good thing, if I'm being honest with you guys. So if I shoot him from the back, unfortunately I didn't really hit his rear, but if I manage to go through a part of his armor that is really lightly armored, for example, I can't shoot him, right there, his side armor, I'm going to be able to pen him. Still, this tank, still ridiculous, if you ask me. Ah, okay, right there. Artillery hit me and they knocked me out. Yeah, either way, I'm not really a big fan of the high explosive changes so far. I've only played 3 matches so far. Played 1 before I started recording. And the first one was in my KV2, and it wasn't a lot of fun because it was the same problem. I was just facing other KV2s, and with the lack of being able to find a weak spot, you kind of do like 80 or 100 damage to another KV2 with a 152mm howitzer, which is kind of sad if I think about it, but is probably just the way that Wargaming have intended for that game to be. But either way, yeah, not a big fan so far. So we're going to be using the artillery right now. We're going to be using the different ammo types. I'm going to show you guys what kind of a loadout I'm running on my artillery, usually most of the time. Should I use, yeah, I'm going to use the large repair kit, large med kit, because now with people being able to actually see your shots, you have to be mobile, because artillery is going to be counter battering you even more now with the changes. And I have to be honest, I don't think that the artillery changes are that horrible with the change of driving forward, and you have to reposition. But we'll have to see how the already changes are actually dealt with. With the different shell types that we have. But first we have to get into a game. Probably gonna take a bit of time. Or not. Or not. Okay, so I'm gonna be heading into my ditch. Or no, actually I'm gonna be heading over there to be able to shoot the mountain. We have 3 artillery shells, or 3 new shells. We have the standard high explosive shell that didn't really change by much. It still does the most amount of stun damage. Then we have the other shell, the second high explosive shell, which does more damage, by about 300 HP, but it has less, it actually has no stun at all. And then you have the AP shell, which has almost no damage, a large amount of pen, but since I'm playing a T92, and even if you pen and you only do 5 or 600 damage, it's not really worth it. So yeah, those are the choices that you have. And to be fair, they all seem to be, well, at least the first choice is still the standard one. I'm still moving, that's why. God damn it. I thought, why was my circle not closing? Okay, so this is a bit awkward right now because I'm kind of very far at the front. And I'm really not able to hit anything right here. I might be able to hit this gorilla. Okay, we hit the FV, and you can see that the tracer actually goes all the way back, like in the old school World of Tanks, in the old version. We're gonna use a new shell, the shell that does more damage. We did 397 damage to that FV. And we have a 40-second reload time. So there's another FV over here. Okay, we just saw artillery fire somewhere from here. Okay, there was artillery right here. We're gonna fire one shot. Actually, it was really close. It was right here. But either way, we're gonna refocus. Next shell is going to be a AP shell off of this one. First, we are going to be loading another high explosive shell that does damage because we didn't see what our damage output was right there. Let's see if we can help these guys over here in the valley. We can get a shot off right into this nest. 595 damage to the E100, so that's a lot of damage right there that we did. Especially considering that the high explosive damage doesn't really do that much anymore. 595, but we didn't stun him. At least that's something I can get behind. I just really dislike the stun mechanic because the stun mechanic is really disgusting. It completely makes you just completely useless, and it's just really annoying. So at least the AP shell should fly the fastest. And we actually managed to hit the gorilla. So the question is now, since the AP shell does 650 damage plus 25 or minus 25%, let's see what happens. So I want to see when this gorilla pops up, I want to see his HP bar. So as soon as the gorilla, he pops up right there, we actually just tracked him. Or we didn't even hit him, to be fair. So that kind of sucks, but that's what the AP shell did occasionally in the original artillery back in the days when it was just released, or when you still had AP shells for artillery. Unfortunately, right there, we did not manage to penetrate his armor. And it looks like we're gonna die now. In just a second, we're going to be a dead man. So yeah, EBR 105 just rushed us. That's something that can happen even in the standard game. It still happens right here, but I'm not sure. I think that on the one hand, the fact that you have to move, that you have to be more involved in the game as an artillery piece is a nice thing. On the other hand, having 3 different shells is also not the worst thing. 3 different shell types. Each and every single shell is good for a certain specific situation, but I don't really see the point of AP shells if they don't do massive amounts of damage. Because I have to, I don't really play a lot of artillery. I dislike artillery from the get-go. But the AP shells doing 650 damage with the 240 millimeters caliber gun that we have on this T92 is a bit of a, I'm not sure, it's a bit of a disappointment. I thought it would at least do 900 damage or maybe 1,000 damage, because hitting AP shells, or actually, yeah, okay, hitting AP shells used to be really difficult, but I think with the new system, look at that, he just bounced a high explosive shell on a Grilla. That's ridiculous. So maybe with the new system, with having better aim, with, you know, not being as inaccurate as you were back in the days, it might be working. But so far, I think the RD changes aren't the worst. The high explosive changes are a lot worse. And the RD changes, I think they could be, or they could have potential. But either way, we're gonna finish this video right now because it's probably gone on for way too long. Hopefully you guys saw a bit of an overview, could see my points and my perspective on things regarding the current changes for the high explosive rounds and the artillery shells and the artillery pieces. It looks like that the game is developing still after 10 years of being on the market. I'm not really sure if it's developing in the right direction though, especially with Crew 2.0 and with the high explosive changes. I think that the game is going into a direction that we would really not like to see it to go. But that is their decision in the end. If they really want to kill the game, this is going to be their choice. So, hopefully you guys did enjoy. As always, comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.